G'day YouTubers and welcome to episode 3 in the North of Moreton series. In this episode I'm going to have a look at Brennan Shoal, Smith's Rock and a few marks around the area, as well as some shipwrecks in the area and a little bit of their history. I hope you enjoy it. I'll just start off here with a general overview of the marks I have in the area. There's some more further to the north, and I'm not going to get through all of the ones that are on screen at the moment. I mainly wanted to put them up here so that I could overlay the green zone on it, and you can see where all the marks are in relation to the local green zones. The principal one to worry about is the one around Flinders. I used to fish in there a lot, loved that spot, but it's now a green zone. You also need to be careful of that green zone on the northern end of Moreton, and I've never fished in near there, but I do have a mark that's a little bit close to it, and it looks like it'd be a decent mark to have a look around. But do be aware of that green zone, because there is some really good ground inside that green zone. You just don't want to go there. Now I'll just zoom in on this section here. This is the marks we're going to cover in this video. We'll talk about them, we'll have a look at the bathymetry, and of course give you the GPS marks for them. In the marks that you see here, the green designates a wreck, and the red just designates a fishing spot. So I'll talk about all the red marks first, then we'll have a little bit of a talk about the green marks and some of their history, and see how that goes for time, whether I can go any further north than that. This first mark is definitely closer to Moreton Island than I have ever fished before, but the bathymetry in the area looks really good. I think it's definitely worth having a look at given the right weather conditions, but just be aware of that green zone a little bit to the west of it. Don't want to stray in there, although the structure in there looks even better. But again, you will get fined. And you are close enough to the island that someone's going to see you, get the number of your boat, and dob you in. This next mark's another one that I wasn't aware of. I generally fish closer to Brennan's, but this one's called Bombora, and to me that conjures up an image of a big pinnacle or a big ridge. Don't know exactly what's down there. The bathymetry looks like it might be a pinnacle, but go and have a look at that one. It does look promising. These next 3 marks are all on Brennan Shoal. Now, that's a good area to fish, or it used to be. As I've said in previous videos, I haven't fished up in this area for quite a few years now, but I used to prefer it going around the north end of Moreton instead of crossing the bar when the weather wasn't suitable. Launched out of Bribey in those days when I was going around the north end. Now these next 2 marks are for Smith's Rocks. I haven't fished these marks, I'm quite sure of that, because if you look at the map, they're nearly directly north of the eastern shore of Moreton Island, and I was definitely further to the east of that when I was fishing around what I knew as Smith's Rocks. So these may be worth having a look at. If you're heading out to Smith's Rocks, these aren't very far out of your way, so I suggest you check them out on your way. This next one's also called Smith's Rock, and I may have fished this one. It is further to the east and definitely off to the east of the coast of Moreton. I think I was further to the east. It's a bit hard when you don't have GPS marks. We used to just sight off the island and know we're in roughly the right spot, and then we'd sound around till we found something. Wasn't as precise as it is these days. Much prefer these days. These next 3 marks are definitely what I'd call Smiths, and in the area that I used to fish. Just go out to there, sound around, and see what you can turn up on your sounder. As always when fishing, some days are diamonds, some days are stones. You need to have a plan of where to go and where to sound around. So these marks here are on the north-south reef line. If you follow that north-south reef line and sound along it, you should turn something up. I'd be really amazed if you sounded along that reef line and didn't turn something up. This next mark here is called the bulldozers, and that's all there was when I got it. I don't remember where I got it from, but there it is. It's right on Smith's Rock, and could well be a mark on Smith's Rock, but I suspect that it is yet another mark on the Marriott Adele shipwreck. There's 5 marks in all on this wreck. 4 of them are just above this mark, another one's further to the north. Obviously they're not all on the wreck. I'd say that some of the marks are just variations in the GPS signal. It used to be nowhere near as accurate as it is today. The military had deliberate distortions put into the signal so that civilians didn't get the pinpoint accuracy that's becoming possible now. So that's my guess as to why there's so many different marks for a wreck. The one further to the north is, I think, a mistake, but I haven't found the wreck myself. If I saw something down there on the sounders I had back in the day when I was fishing this area a lot, I would have just thought it was a rock formation because the sounder couldn't tell me much more than that, or perhaps I couldn't interpret it any better than that. If there's a lump on the bottom, I just assumed it was a rock. These 4 marks are the shipwreck of the Marriott Adele. The Marriott Adele was on a voyage from Galveston to Adelaide when it was lost off Smith Rock on the 15th of May 1950. Like the Rufus King wreck down on the South Passage Bar, or the half of the Rufus King wreck that's still there, it was a Liberty ship built in America during World War II. It was nearly 135 metres long, just over 17 metres beam, and it drew nearly 11 metres. It grossed 7,200 tonnes, so it was a pretty big ship. Had a top speed of 11 knots on 339 horsepower. There's still a reasonable amount of the wreck there to hold fish, and it's a popular diving spot. So I think it's well worth dropping a line down on it as well if you can sound up some fish around it. But do try not to catch any divers. And that brings us to the line of surveyed reef that I have in the Fish Tracks program. That runs all the way from about Shallow Tempest all the way up to Hutchinson's. It's broken. There's bits where it is there and bits where it's not, but it is a very long line of reef. And speaking of the Fish Tracks program, there's a link in the description below if you'd like to have a look at that. It runs on a Windows PC, needs Windows 10 or 11, and it's free to download for a 28-day trial. These other 4 wreck marks all purport to be the SS St. Paul. Now, obviously it's not in all 4 places, but it gives you a starting point to have a sound around if you want to find it. Is it worth finding? Well, let's have a look at the history of the wreck and the type of ship it was, and you can decide for yourself whether it's worth having a look at it to either fish or dive. The SS St. Paul was a steamship of 1,660 tonnes, and at the time it sank it was carrying approximately 2,800 tonnes of chromium ore. By all accounts it's relatively intact on the seafloor, sitting upright approximately 1 kilometre to the east of Smith Rock, with its bow pointing west towards Smith Rock. With that information, you shouldn't have any trouble in identifying it if you find it on the sounder. It'll be pretty obvious it's not a rock. Or I probably should say that at least it will be pretty obvious on a modern sounder. Before we finish, I just want to run through some bathymetry shots of this area. If you look at the marks that are to the west of Smith Rocks, the ones that I said were north of the shore of Moreton, and I didn't think I'd fished that far west of Smith Rocks, 3 marks there, you'll notice that there's not much in the way of bathymetry near them. Doesn't mean to say that there's nothing there to be worth stopping and fishing, but it does mean I'd put a lot less weight on those marks than I would on the others that I've shown you. Also the fact that I don't think I'd fished in that area in all the times I've been over through that water. These days, with modern sounders, it might be worth going over and certainly having another look, but I wouldn't waste a lot of time sounding around looking for something that I'm not sure you're going to find. Bearing in mind also that the sounder I had in those days wasn't that great, and given the cone that it used to show on the bottom, there's huge areas of bottom that I never ever saw. Just letting it cycle through the palettes here that are available, because I find that the different palettes allow me to see different pieces of structure on the bottom. Sometimes one colour works better than another colour for me. I'll just point out that the blue palette allows me to see the structure in that green zone a lot better than any of the others. Don't be tempted to go in there. I'm not saying you should fish there at all. I'm saying stay out of the green zone. But the structure there is impressive on the bathymetry, and obviously why they made it into a green zone. I'll just overlay the depth contours from Navionics on the video, so you can see that reef line again running north-south, and that jives with the bathymetry that we've just been looking at. I think the bathymetry images show it up a lot better, but this also has its place. I certainly find the steepness of the drop-offs easier to see in here, but it all combines to give you an overall view of what's happening on the bottom. And finally, I'm just going to let these bathymetry maps play through again, only this time I'm going to overlay some of the areas where I think would be worth sounding around that we don't have any marks for. Certainly when I get out there next, I'm going to be having a look at them, and I'll make a video with some of my sounder shots. I think these spots are well worth having a look at, and by all appearances they aren't well-known areas. I think with so many boats on the water now, someone's going to know every spot on the bay and offshore. I don't think you're likely to find a spot that no one has ever fished before, but it's always fun to go looking for one, or at least discovering one that not many people know about. That's half the fun I have on the water, is looking for spots and finding them. Once I've found it and had a couple of fishes of it, I can look for another one. I'm going to wrap the video up at this point. Thanks for taking the time to watch it. We'll move a little bit further north in the next video, and that will be up sometime in the next month. Hopefully we're going to get a bit of good weather this coming year. The one just gone has been abysmal for getting out on the water. Some of that was work commitments, kept me off the water on the few good weekends we did have. When I decided to do the refit on my boat, we did have a reasonable run of not bad weekends where I could have been out there had my boat been usable. So that was just bad timing, but by and large it's been a pretty terrible year. So I hope to have a better year next year. I've got big plans now that I've got the new equipment in the boat. That's going to make for better videos if everything works out the way I hope it will. So we're getting on for Christmas now. I hope to get another couple of videos out before Christmas. See how that goes. I hope you all manage to get out in the water and have a fish over Christmas. Until next time, good fishing.